product from BirdDog, and it's called Central 2.0 Pro, and it is an NDI router automation tool. So a lot of cool stuff in here for an NDI centric production. So we'll do a deep dive into that, show some automation technologies that you can use to drive that. But before we get there, I want to invite everybody, please, if you have any questions, anything you'd like me to discuss during the show, just put them in the comments and we'll get to them live. Also, if you'd like to join us live on air, we do have a link in the show notes. So just click on that link and somebody from the studio will get you on. Okay, let's get started then. So I want to start by really giving a little bit of a dive into what BirdDog Central is. And to a certain extent, I want to talk a little bit about the reason it's important, because we don't just cover things normally, just because they're new, but because we think there's some real value in the marketplace for them. So if you think of something like Dante has a very interesting way to let you configure it. What you do is you set up a set of endpoints, things that are feeding audio and things that are receiving audio. And then in a central location, you're able to take and say, I want the audio that's coming from this sender to be routed to this receiver or all of these receivers, multiple receivers. So it gives you a way centrally to manage a widely distributed or very complex network of devices, both providing and receiving audio. NDI, on the other hand, has from its inception had a very different approach to configuration. It's what you'd call an edge-based approach. So you would go to a device that could potentially receive NDI audio and video, NDI media generally, and you would tell it, I want you to listen to this source. So it's a subtle difference, but it's a very important one when you get to configurations at scale. If I had to go to 150 individual screens and set them up, basically to say, I want you to receive this video, I want you to receive this video, it can become somewhat tedious, error prone, and potentially create some real issues with how you could operate and run a production, especially one that may be more AV centric. You're in an event, like a hybrid event. We talked about monitors in our last show. That would be a perfect example. If I had dozens of monitors on set, monitors out in hallways, and I needed to control what was going to them, doing something on the edge could be problematic. And so that's where Central comes in. What BirdDog Central does is let you take NDI sources and it effectively proxies them on the destination devices. It lets you talk to that device and say, I want you now to listen to this NDI source. So it creates a central place where all of the NDI distribution can be managed. And I think, when you compare it to the way it would work in Dante, it is very similar. Central location, multiple endpoints that you configure. So what's in Central? There's a few things. The first is that it allows you to set up basically endpoint devices. So for currently, because of the way sort of the NDI ecosystem exists right now, those endpoint devices with Central are still BirdDog devices. So BirdDog Flexes, BirdDog Studios, devices that would basically be part of the BirdDog ecosystem, because the system, Central, needs to basically control what gets received by each of these endpoints. So until that becomes a more common API, this will be driving off BirdDog endpoints. But it can take any NDI source from any device and do the routing to those endpoints. So you can take and say, I want to send this particular NDI source to this particular endpoint. So that's one model that you can use, so point to point. The second thing you can do is you can turn around and say, I want to group a set of endpoints. So I want these 3 monitors in the auditorium or 4 monitors in my auditorium to be part of one group. And what I then say is take this NDI source and send it to that group. And everyone in that group will receive that one NDI source. So that's a second model. The third is you can take and group NDI sources and just tell a group or a single distribution device, display device, to say, I want you to listen to this aggregate group. And then you get to select basically any one of the sources in that group and say, this is the one I want you to send out now. So very much like NDI router from the free NDI tools, where you can just turn around and say, I have a collection of incoming NDIs, and I'm going to poke and set the which one I want to be going to an output. So that's sort of the third element that Central brings. The fourth thing it brings is it allows you to set up multiple concurrently active playlists. Basically, pull video in, and it creates NDI feeds out of those videos as playlists that you can then feed to any group of destinations or single destinations. So again, think of the things that you would normally do inside of sort of event-based productions, and this is really where you start to see this shine. That's exactly a very common use case where I'm just playing a roll of video that sort of keeps looping, and I may have different roles playing in different locations. So the fifth thing, sort of the last thing it does, is it has something that lets you retransmit NDI sources, but taking any video and then substituting specific audio for that. So it lets you sort of take those as 2 separate NDI sources, combine them, and send them out as a new feed. And that could be ideal if, say, somebody wants to be able to listen to a translation. You could actually send out little NDI feeds that would all be different audio sources for these people. So you could have one video feed, but multiple translation feeds that could be going out. And this can all be handled now inside of Central. So a few really cool features wrapped around routing NDI in a large infrastructure. So seems we have quite a number of comments here. So let me jump over here and sort of catch up. So we have Xavier Ukpong. So Xavier, thank you for waiting for the show. Definitely appreciate that. We also have Michael Quist. Michael was asking about a few things before the show. Unfortunately, can't make it, but thank you, and I appreciate you. Basically letting us know you're here, and hopefully you find the show useful. So we have America Newscape. America, thank you. Hopefully this is something that would make sense. So, okay, we have Turner Family Portraits was saying that he wasn't getting any audio. So hopefully all of that is set up. So thank you, Turner, for letting us know. So let's see, we have Dennis Van Dalen. Dennis, thank you for joining us from Holland. Hope all is well in your neck of the woods. So we have Samuel Nordvik from Norway. Samuel, thank you for joining us. So we have Archer. I apologize if I'm saying the name. Archerami. So Archer, hopefully you've avoided the worst of the storm down there, but just sending good wishes from everybody here in the community, because I know it's hit Florida pretty hard down there with the storm. So we have Håkan Frost. So Håkan, thank you for joining us from Sweden. So we have Aziz. Aziz is asking, what kind of software and hardware do I need in order to be able to do these routings apart from the NDI software? So actually, that's a good question. It comes down to how this actually works. So the reality is you don't need high-end hardware to make this work. So first, when it comes to the NDI routing, what it's effectively doing is it's simply acting as a middleman to go and say to an end device, I need you to listen to this NDI source. So from a hardware point of view, it's not taking that NDI feed in from one location and sending it out to another. It is simply getting a signal that says, tell this receiver to subscribe to this sender. So you're not adding load by having multiple routes of video being managed by Central. The other piece is for things like the playlist. That will require more of processing than simply sort of the signaling type processing. But in order to create these playlists, you actually have to go through and use a converter, which effectively streamlines the video into what would effectively allow the system to basically wrap the video packets and just send them out without doing a lot of encoding and processing real time. So that keeps the footprint down significantly as well. So that means that even, what I've been told from the folks at BirdDog, we have somebody who is joining us from BirdDog, which is good to see. But that it can run on something like a Nook, and you could successfully use it from there. And as I get a bit more into how it actually works and some of the tech that's involved in this, I think this will be a little clearer. So now, speaking of people from BirdDog, we have Jake Feynman. If you people don't know Jake, he is a great guy. I've turned to him when we've needed stuff, and he has done everything to help us out. So definitely appreciate Jake. And if you don't know him, just look him up on BirdDog. Try to connect with him. He's a fantastic resource and knows the tech behind all of this stuff incredibly well. So a great person to have as part of your short list of technical support people. So let's see, we also have Christian joining us. So he's asking, does this technology work similar to digital signage technology like Externity? I am not particularly familiar with the digital signage space. So I know some of them may use their own protocols and other things. I think the focus of this is not necessarily generic signage, so certainly NDI could play in that space, but it'd be much more something that you'd want to constantly be working with. So when I have a session for my first session at an event somewhere, I may have all the monitors displaying, different videos or different, text messages. And then in the hall, I may have a second monitor, which is going to say what's going on inside this auditorium and displaying that. But then when I need the next event, I'm switching all that up and sort of moving it on to the next one. This would be different from sort of a point of sale signage requirement where you're just going through sort of a rotating playlist, or you're moving between your price list and product feature list. So things like that. So hopefully, that gives you a sense of the uses. I'm sorry I don't have something more specific, though, that I could share with you there on how this would work. Okay, so now that we are sort of looking at this, let's take a look at the actual interface. And I'm going to put an asterisk on that, and you'll see why in a second here. So what I have here is the UI for BirdDog Central. And before actually, if we have Jake Feynman from BirdDog. Jake, how are you?
Hey, doing well. How are you doing today, John?
All right. So good to see you here.
Good to see you too.
So
I'm glad we're talking about Central. This is exciting.
So yeah, I mean, I know this is something that you've invested a lot of time in and a lot of feedback. So, I mean, what we definitely want to communicate is sort of the broad ecosystem that this can play in, from
Yep.
some of the things with the event space, but also larger studios. And if you think of studios today, there are a lot of elements that are visual elements that are all in play and are changing throughout a production. So
There are.
and having a way to manage that centrally uh,
Yep.
is
It's incredible.
is
It's super advantageous to be able to have all of your NDI sources, in one location, to be able to grab those and route them from a source to a specific BirdDog destination, and then even the exciting virtual NDI sources and routers that we've added into the program are really incredible too.
yeah. So I mean, some of the things I think that we're going to be touching on here
Hmm.
will deal with uh, sort of the automation side as well.
Cool.
And I know that, I mean, I should put an asterisk on here that Central is 2.0 is still a beta. And
Yep.
so, but the plus side to that is it is available now
To
as
test
a,
out for you guys to, check it out. Um,
yeah. So
so
this,
excited.
yeah. So I think that's definitely a cool thing. Uh, are there any specific things you think we should, definitely focus on in today's show? Because
Um, Well, I definitely want to look at the virtual router module in the Pro version, because that's one of my favorite units to use. NDI has also came out with a virtual router in their NDI 5.1
yep.
release, I believe. However, with that whole API control that we now have access to with BirdDog Central, we really can take that off to some Stream Decks. We can take that to touch panels in meeting spaces. Any third-party source can now, or control system can control these virtual routers.
So I think it's important because there's in the product
Yep.
there are multiple routers that you can have concurrently active as well. So,
Correct.
and I think this is one thing. So because if you can, you brought up it was in NDI 5.5, the new router utility, the
Yep.
free router utility. But I think the thing that's probably most significant in terms of the routing capability inside of Central is that you can
Mhm.
have multiple concurrently operating routers. So
Correct.
you could be driving all different destination sources all concurrently.
Exactly.
And we
I'm currently using two in my production, to you over here now. I have one virtual router source that's being sent into Studio Monitor for a couple demonstrations, and then I also have this one that I'm using for just being able to switch over to any of my other cameras that I have in my
yep,
around. Just being able to pop on over is super incredible, right? There's
yep.
that Stream Deck, and it's amazing, instantaneous switching. So.
So yeah, I mean the other thing that because you have the automation that makes a huge difference, but
Right.
it's also the scale issue. When you're dealing with large event venues, having that type of scale where you can say, I may have 20 or 30 concurrent destinations that I need to be sourcing for
Exactly.
and dynamically.
Either and having the ability to push either a single stream to all those, let's say, 20 displays, or if you wanted to send them individually, you have that ability through the web interface, easily and accessibly, and then that automation control. Um, it's a
Yes.
good. I mean, I really see Central in every single NDI installation moving forward, whether it is a broadcast facility, whether it is NDI digital signage for an event or meeting space. There are too many advantageous tools in this program suite to not use it.
Yeah. So one of the things, so uh, I definitely want to just sort of show a bit of the architecture here.
Yeah, that'd be
So,
great.
uh, so since we have this, one of the key points here, which actually just as Jake called in, I was about to talk about, is
Yeah.
that you'll notice that the UI here is a web-based UI, and that's really important
Yes.
because in addition to providing sort of the foundational elements for automation, because you can then just use web-based calls to automate things. What it's saying, though, is that Central itself is not what you're seeing here on the screen. Central is actually a web server that's running on the system here. And because of that, anybody from any browser on any system, Mac, PC, even though Central itself runs, the server piece runs on a PC,
Yep.
you can be Mac, you can be Windows.
You could pull it up on your iPhone and, start just walk around the place and switching sources. It's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just show this since you mentioned that. One of the really cool things is the way that if I change the size of this,
Yep. The
you
resolution scales
not only does the resolution scale, but it actually then changes to something which would be ideal for
on a mobile
a
format.
mobile format. So it gives you, a really great footprint for, that can adapt based on what you have to make it work.
Exactly.
But what this also means, if you are working with this, is that I can run this anywhere. And if I have automation already dialed in for this, I don't have to have any browser interface up
Not
and
at
running.
all.
So you could set this could run at the beginning of a production. Then you just have, buttons on a Stream Deck that you're using to sort of manage all of this.
Exactly. Makes it super easy.
So let me talk a little bit about, the way the model for this, and at its simplest, it's a point to point sort of take a source and route it to a destination. And so I'll shut things off so it actually trims down a little here. But
Yep.
what you have is over here these are all my sources, things that I can route to a destination. And over here are the different destinations that I have available. So in this case, I have a Flex and I have a Studio. So two end destinations. So at its most basic, I can take and say, I want to send a source over here
Yep.
to a destination over here. And then I just
I want
say connect.
Click connect.
And that will make that connection happen.
Now
And
that decoder is subscribing to the NDI source that you selected. And what's fantastic also about Central is that it doesn't matter what kind of NDI source it is. So it could be our BirdDog cameras, it could be a converters, but I even see down below you have your RTX screen capture running.
Yep.
So that gets pulled. vMix outputs, TriCaster outputs, any NDI source, right? We can route to any of our BirdDog decoders.
Yeah, and so I just want to, since we have you, this will work with NDI HX as well, or it's full NDI for.
Once we add our Silicon 2 update to our converters, which should be coming very soon, then we'll be able to subscribe those HX sources to our BirdDog destinations.
So cool. So that's something, because I know there's a lot of
It's on the
people
timeline. Yeah,
perfect.
we're really happy about that. I mean, I'm really looking forward to adding an HX into all of our devices. So specifically for this.
So cool. So that just when we sort of talk about this. So you have all the sources and you can connect to a destination. The other thing that you can do, and again, this is still sort of the basic stuff. I could turn around and say, gee, I want to have my two destinations. I actually want them to always show the same thing. So
Right.
I can actually go in and say, I want to create a new group. And we'll just say, we're going to call that, so set displays, because I used it before. And I'm going to say, okay, I want to put these two devices into that. Click OK.
Yep.
And now what I've done is I've created these two devices as a group. And so you'll notice now that, they're both saying connected. So if I were to send something to this group, all of these devices now, these destination devices, would receive that same signal. So again, it's the same sort of thing. So if I come over here, I'll go up to here and say connect. You'll now have
those two will kick over.
both
Exactly.
of these displays are now going to be looking at the same thing. So that, I think, is again really important, because you are not just limited to point, but you can go point to group.
Yep.
The other piece, which Jake had been talking about, was with sort of routers. So you can actually take, and a router is really simple. What you can do here is you can take and say, I want to create a group of sources, different NDI feeds that can be used. And then I
Mhm.
can just go over and say, I want to create a group and just say, so if I go in here and select this, you can see what I did is I selected the group cameras. So these are all the cameras that I have here. And when those cameras are there, so let me sort of pop up here. Uh, so now, if I come in here, these are all different cameras that we have here, and I can select any of these cameras, and it will change which one's going out. Now,
Yep.
where is this cool? Because I can go here and say, what I now want to do is say, this is my, uh, these are my camera
Central
feeds.
router,
So
right?
I can go here and say, I want to send this over to my set displays. And now when I do that connection, anything that I select here now will be routed out to both of those display devices. So this
Right.
gives you another way now to say I want to take a single source and send it out to multiple destinations, but I want to be able to dynamically switch what that source is. So that's sort of the next level in capability in here. Uh, the other piece, which is sort of the next level down, is that,
Oh, this is my favorite. This is one of my favorite modules.
yeah,
I'm so happy that we have this in Central.
yeah. So the one of the things that you have is we mentioned the ability to do playlist, and
Yep.
all these, it's called a generator here. So some of the terminology might not like line up with what you would think, because when I think generator, I sort of have a different mindset.
Totally.
But
I think this is I look at this as a video playback on demand module,
yep.
right?
So when you have this set up, you can see I have all of these. I set them all to play because you can sort of stop and start the list playing. And you can also set them to loop. So it gives you a lot of capability. But what I have set up here is I have individual segments that are set here. So uh, what I can do is say I can select any one of these segments, and so let me sort of go over to the generate function so you can see these are all the segments I have here. So if I said I want to push segment one out to uh, my set displays and I do that connection, uh, what you'll now see, so let's see if we could switch to a shot which sort of has the background in it. Uh, so in a, yep. So
Cool.
okay, so you can see, so this is just one of the segments that I have, but I can just pop now to say, I want to actually go to sort of segment two, or I want to go to segment three. And so now I'm just moving individually through these different segments I have here, and they are all just playing in a loop behind me. So this gives you now the ability, as I'm doing this, to have to be changing up playlists. And right now, I just set these up as individual segments. This would be the sort of thing where if I have my, my first panel and my second panel, I can just flip through that. But you could have this as a long playlist. So this could be something where if you're doing sort of teasers for products before an event, you could have a whole set of product plays going on and then change it over to another playlist during the event for the panelists. And, so a lot of flexibility in this. And the thing is, these are all active concurrently. So in something like vMix, you usually have a playlist that's sort of
Yep.
running, and then you switch between different playlists to sort of push through them. Here, all of them are concurrently active, and that's really powerful because you could have any number of these things sitting in the product as well.
Exactly. And one more thing is that they're all API controllable too. So if you are bringing that into vMix and whatnot, and you want to get into some heavy scripting, you could essentially call out to the central web server to say, "Hey, when I switch over to this input, let's start playback of central." Or when I, you
Yep.
know, cut away from this, let's stop the playlist or skip on to the next one. So that way you can essentially use this in your live productions. But then also, just as you had it over on your screen earlier, just to be able for like digital signage or looped videos that are, or now routing the anything to those displays.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that I had mentioned to you last night. I mean, I would love to have images in there as well because I could see that there's
Yes.
a lot of use cases for that, and so hopefully that would be something that you'll be able to add. Uh, but one of the things that I did point out there is, let me sort of click down
Mhm.
here. Oh, sorry about that. So the, the way you
Yep.
create these is there is an import facility. So you can take any sort of MP4 based video audio source and you can bring those in by just doing add media files. And what this will do is effectively convert them into the data component of what would be needed to be fed out NDI. And so you are effectively making them very lightweight bit streams as opposed to having to do heavyweight encoding or anything like that, which is, again, that's letting you run this on much lower end systems.
Exactly. Because it's only the network data traffic now that it's NDI speed HQ. So we convert that into the MOV format. So that way it's just easily accessibly streaming when needed.
Yeah,
So,
so you're effectively wrapping it, basically taking the
yep.
data packets, wrap them, and send them out. So yeah,
Yep.
so this is something. It's an extra step, but there's a real reason behind it. Uh,
Yes.
now, this also goes, this goes to some of the things that when we talk about, different approaches to building something, the fact that this is web based as sort of your control UI here that limits, I mean, in a traditional sort of heavy UI framework,
Right.
I could drag those files in and just say use them. And in the background, it could do all those conversions and other stuff.
Hmm.
Because this is running now as a web based UI, this is a more straightforward way to do it. But, that should definitely not be an obstacle to using
No.
this because the power of having that and the number of streams you can do on low end hardware, I think, is really important.
I'll also have to check our API controls for that too, because we might have that accessible for generating those sources. So potentially you could have a watch folder
That would be
and
great.
have
Yep.
those flip over. So let me triple check about that though.
No, because that would be ideal. If you could just stick stuff in a watch folder, then you'd be able to
Yep.
handle that and put them into the video folder to be called up.
Yeah, let me check. Let me check with the team about that. That'd be really great.
So the the last thing in this, in terms of capabilities, is the ability to put together what you call retransmitter, which is basically taking an NDI video source, an NDI audio source, combining them and retransmitting them as a single source. But so before I get to that, though, let me. I want to jump over to. We have another couple of questions here.
Sure.
So, let's see. Oh gosh, I've gotten more. I haven't been. So let's see. Uh, so so Hakan Frost was saying, how is Central's routing different from the NDI router from the NDI tool? So hopefully, Hakan, we've talked a bit about that, where the NDI router is basically, you sort of have a single active router at a time. It doesn't have API controls yet, uh, and it basically, it's a great tool as a free tool, but if you're looking at this sort of as a router in scale where I need to do a lot of different things across a lot of different devices, this as a solution is really comprehensive. And the fact that you can automate it, I think is, we're all about automation here on Streaming Alchemy. So definitely, hopefully that helps. So the other is we have Aziz. A second. So we have Aziz is saying, did BirdDog bring their own NDI? And I think, Jake, I'll let you talk because it isn't your own NDI, but it's your own sort of firmware implementation of things.
It is. At least that's on all of our hardware units. I believe essentially, we're using the NDI SDK, so we have ability to jump in and see all of those NDI sources. Um, just like earlier that we mentioned, we're essentially using API and controls from Central to our BirdDog devices, which is why those are the only destination sources because we're effectively reprogramming, our units. But when it comes to the sources, it doesn't matter what's generating that NDI source. So whether that's like Adobe Premiere, sending out their program video edits,
Yep.
screen capture, or anything that generates NDI will pop up here.
Okay. So let's see. So we also, yep. I mean, let's go. So Christian was asking, does Central work with other non-BirdDog NDI devices? It works on the input side.
It does.
On the output side, it is limited to your devices. But I should point, all of these as sources actually have their own standard NDI feeds coming out as well.
Yep.
So if you have another device that you need to feed, you could have that subscribe to
Jump it in manually.
NDI device,
Absolutely.
like NDI Studio Monitor will work fine, and do that manually. So there's you can get some of the benefits with non-BirdDog hardware, but I think the sort of ecosystem model here, if you're having for the uh, destination devices, if those are BirdDog, everything sort of works
Yeah.
seamlessly for how you want to do it.
And then something that I just wanted to add is that if you guys run NDI Bridge, you can use that to flip your HX sources in the local mode over to full bandwidth. So that way they can be received by your current BirdDog decoders. And this is just before Silicon 2 gets out. I've done that as a workaround just to get those sources to, get to the correct destinations.
So I mean, that's so I just want to take off of that
Yeah.
for a second. This is again an example where you can have something like Bridge running in the background in a rack somewhere. You can
Yep.
have Central running in a rack somewhere, and you just get these abilities now in your network. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that, where the traditional production workflow mindset was always linear. So I have inputs, and they go here, and then I do this processing, and then this processing, and then they come out there. And now we're going to see that really it's more of a cloud of products that are looking at things and doing things to them. And then other things are just picking them up. And you don't have to know the pipe necessarily. It's
Right.
just, I'm just waiting for this to come to me and then I have it. So a lot of exciting possibilities here. And I think, you were talking a bit about this, Jake, yesterday, where the fact that BirdDog has focused so much on software and sort of the software model.
Yep.
Because I think when people talk about BirdDog, their first inclination is it's a hardware company.
It's
I make
it's
cameras.
PTZ
I make
cameras.
they
That's
said,
it, right?
and
No, and that's something that we're really trying to dispel is that, well, we definitely had to start with creating our converters. I mean, that was the first box, right? The studio, and I have one behind me
me too.
if you're using them, right? No, they're fantastic. I mean, when NDI released that technology for us to really leverage getting cameras and signals on the network, which has already been a thing of the past, but just not easily accessible for
Yep.
broadcasters. And over the course of 5 years, BirdDog, NDI, and all of us manufacturers that are in the NDI space have just been adding all those tools necessary. So now there are a bunch of NDI hardwares in facilities, and it's now the next step. What do you do after? You have to control them. You have to automate them. You have to be able to route sources or, use cam control, free software, or even Dyno to analyze things, right?
Yep.
So we're adding to the tool set that's really taking NDI to the next level. So
Yeah, which is, bringing it full circle. That's really critical when your workflow is more of a amorphous set of tools. Now
right,
it's all network connected. There are no linear flows. So having the ability to manage that, to analyze that, all the tools that you needed in the past for
yep,
analog and sort of linear digital, you now need for this more distributed digital environment.
exactly.
So, all right. So let's see. We also have Battle for Freedom. So Battle, thank you for joining us. Great to have you here, and hopefully there's some cool things you'll be able to take out from this. So let's see, we have Christian has said, this looks like it can work well as digital signage too for other tools.
Absolutely. I mean, realistically, if you guys haven't seen this yet, it's the BirdDog Play, hopefully shipping very soon. But essentially, well, when you have, a bunch of 10, 20, 50 displays with some BirdDog plays on them, not only being able to group the plays together is advantageous and central, but then just being able to use that generator module to push the looped videos that you have in your facility that you need for digital signage to these guys is going to be fantastic, right?
Yeah,
Um,
and using technologies like Bridge could let you do that across multiple facilities too. So now you
yes,
can sort of run
yes.
this in one location, but be controlling things.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. I have a bunch of sources that come in through BirdDog Cloud or Bridge or whatever the method is, right? And then now, if they're local NDI sources on my production network, I can route those to my facility. So we're using that in a couple really great workflows with cloud to be able to take in those remote sources and then, bring either C suites or video production spaces and connecting remote locations and then now sending those remote sources throughout the facility.
so, all right, so let's see. We have a few more. So it says, do you need? This is Hakan is saying, do you need to route to a BirdDog device, or does it also work with NDI router from NDI tools? So the the destination devices that sort of do the decoding, the NDI decoding, for it to work fully uh, with Central, it needs to be a BirdDog device currently. But as I mentioned, you also have NDI feeds coming out of this. So you could use this as a, so for instance, I could have all my different segment generators coming out as NDI feeds, and then you could pick those up in router or anything downstream and be using them, how you want.
Yeah, any manufacturer's decoders would work with the generator, retransmitter, or router.
So
But you'll just have to go in and manually select that. Or if they have their own APIs available to do that too, then you would just have two different things to talk to. But that's fine.
So let me see. Then we have one more thing from Aziz. Asking. We talked about the computer. So Aziz, the computer itself does not have to be very big, because a lot of the things that are being done here are really either signaling to tell other devices what to do, or it's just bit pushing because everything in generator is really pre-encoded. So you're just
Yep.
really pushing the bits to the network. So
And the only thing you really need to consider is that network bandwidth and how many units are subscribing to that stream, right? Because then that's that output
yep,
from that central computer. Um, But then just taking that a step further, I don't know if you saw this yet, John, but we do also have the NDI network settings
yep.
inside Central.
I
So
have that right over here. Yep.
if you guys are running like a multicast network, which I'm absolutely recommending for a lot of my larger NDI um, builds, is that hey, let's flip the transmit over to multicast so that way we can send a single stream to the switch and then have
Yep.
the switch handle the duplication to all of the destinations.
Yep. So because I want, Aziz had a second part to that. So I want to,
Oh, sure.
so he was saying that converting signals to NDI is not the safest way. Now, converting these inputs twice is still safe. I want to clarify that. So what BirdDog Central is not doing, it's not taking in an NDI feed, processing that somehow, and then retransmitting it. So all
Correct.
it's doing is it's saying you have an NDI feed in this location here, and it is
It's
telling
pushing the
this
same
remote
packets.
device to say,
Yep.
over here, you take this and connect to him. So it's almost like a proxy. It comes here and says, I'm going to be telling you what you should be doing with this original source over here. So there is no sort of re-encoding, retransmission.
There's no re-encoding or conversion or even the retransmitter. It's effectively like opening up two studio monitors at once, right? You have one
Yep.
subscribing to the video and one subscribing to the audio, and those are both playing out. So we literally just grab those data packets, merge those together, and push that out
Yes.
for retransmitter at
So
least.
in NDI, NDI video is a separate stream from NDI audio, a separate stream from NDI data. So NDI is a little more like subtly, it's more complex, there's more moving parts in it.
Mhm.
So I mean that's how you can do things like where you can have, I think in the latest NDI there are 16 audio
Yeah, 16
channels.
channels, something like
So
that.
that's how this works. So if I take and basically pull some of these channels and recombine them, there's no re-encoding taking place. You're really the most you're doing is reclocking them to make sure they stay in sync, and that would be probably the extent of what's going on that side. So I don't think there's any risk. It's not like a loss in quality or a loss in high latency or anything like that.
Exactly.
It's still the same. And I think the other thing to consider is that full NDI, full bandwidth NDI really is incredibly high quality. I mean, the people that are critical of it, it's almost like you're pixel peeping, looking for things to be critical of,
Yeah,
rather than saying this is the video that people are
exactly.
really looking at. And what most people don't get is that when you watch television, the signal coming from your cable company is pretty low bandwidth. It's probably less than 10 megabits. So if you're taking a signal that's coming in at 140 megabits and converting that down to 10, there's a lot of headroom in there
Hmm.
that you're losing anyway. So I think the quality you get from full bandwidth NDI is really impressive. So all right. So the last thing that I wanted to cover here, and Jake, I'm so grateful for you hanging around with this
Yeah,
because
happy to. This is a great show.
so the last thing I want to talk a bit about is how would you use this with something like a Stream Deck? Because that's something, the whole automation piece matters. And
Right.
so let me I'm going to, if we can take a look at let me see, I have a Stream Deck over here. So let me sort of replace me with the Stream Deck here,
Sure.
and we can. So what I've actually set up here is okay. Yeah, we can look to the Stream Deck on this one. Sorry, I just okay. So what I have here now is just a set of buttons that are set up to say I want to do different types of routing here. So I have my different the segments that I put up, how I switch to those. I have my different cameras, and then I have the different routers that I have. So the two I have, one which just goes through guests and one that goes through cameras. So what these buttons are doing basically is simply if you remember when I was over here and I said, I want to connect this device to this output and I click connect, that's basically what each of these button presses is doing. It's saying, I want to take and send this source to that destination. Uh, and down in the routers, what I have down in these two rows here is basically just saying you select the router and then you pick which one of the videos inside that video group you want to send out from that router. So it's a very streamlined way to do this here. And let me basically, let's see if we could put the Stream Deck UI on the other monitor up in place of Central, and then I can talk a bit more about that. We'll get Jake back on screen with us. Okay, so actually let's put the left monitor here that I have. So because I'm going to show how I set these up. Okay,
Cool.
so the way you can do these is actually really simple. So I'm going to open up, this is segment 1. Now, I know it looks really funky down here, but all this is doing is it's making an HTTP request, which is talking to the web server. Because remember, Central is basically a web server. It's not the UI you're seeing. And it's telling it, it's giving it a command and a subcommand, and it's telling it what devices you're going to use. And so all we've done here is we take this is a simple Stream Deck. You go for what's called a website under Systems, Website. You drag that here. And then when you select that, you can give it a title and you can give it a URL. And the other thing is you tell it, don't open it, just open this up in the background. Don't open up a browser connection. Otherwise, every time you press, you'll open another browser tab. But that's all you need to do. But the question is, how do you get those URLs? And I'm actually going to show you a sort of a cheating way to do it by, let's go back to the BirdDog UI and so here's a little cheat. So say I wanted to take and get the HDMI, the URL to connect. I can select the source. and I can select the destination I want. But now, since this is running in Chrome, there are developer tools that sit in Chrome. So
Oh, you found it.
what I can
Cool.
do is look at network, and when I come here, it's now looking at the conversation that's taking place inside of this browser to the web server. So when I click connect, what you'll see here is there is a new command that was just added. And if I click on that, this over here, that's your URL. So if you want to do this and do this really quickly, you can just
Yep.
go in here, take this, right click, copy the value out of it. And then when you go back
Ready to
into
go.
your Stream Deck, just paste that in the URL and you're done. So you can go through all the different things you want. And this is dead simple. It's like you don't have to even worry about typing it, making sure you get a, it's like just copy it and paste
Yeah,
it.
exactly. You don't have to look at the API documents, which
Yeah.
will hopefully soon be pushed publishing once that all gets finalized. But yeah, this is a perfect way of jumping in.
So, and I'm not trying to short
No,
circuit
it's
the
no, it's
documentation,
no,
but
it's no, totally. I mean, that's a brilliant way to easily make sure that it's the right command. It's everything has the right characters and everything like that. So
yeah. So, I mean, I think when you look at this now, I have the ability not just to control this from a Stream Deck. This is a generic HTTP command. So this is stuff that we've done with vMix scripting, where I can just go and write a whole script and actually do sort of get commands to websites. That's exactly how this would work. So I could be driving everything I want with signage at the same time I'm switching to production and do it all through automation. So definitely really, really cool stuff that you could do. And because vMix gives you a lot of feedback from the state side, so you're looking at vMix and you're sort of seeing the HTML, it basically gives you an XML description of
mhm.
what's going on state-wise in vMix. So you would know, like, if I have certain cameras or certain presets set, and you could be changing, like if I have cameras for different people and I could be changing, bios up on screen as I move cameras positions in vMix. So lots of cool stuff, and you could be driving that all by having something separate do sort of the signage or other types of routing. So I think while it works very well in productions, it also
Mhm.
is a great complement because productions are more complicated, more visual. It's not just the standard over the shoulder shot that you're used to seeing on news. Now it's, they're big sets and they have big wall panels and they're talking to people and they're showing footage and signage. So it's very, very different news, sort of production market for that. And that really just
Yep.
is a reflection of the event community as well. So, okay. So hopefully, this covered everything. Uh, there are a lot more. I mean, this once you get used to it. I mean, Jake actually demoed something the other day with a BirdDog controller for PTZ
Oh
controller,
yes,
which
very very fun.
was definitely cool. And Jake, I think I can help you on that with getting so you would know exactly which source in vMix was in preview. So we could I
Yeah.
reach out to me because I actually have some scripting logic for all that stuff, so you could get
Oh,
that in
awesome.
and
Yeah, we'll definitely, yeah,
drive
we'll
it.
shoot some emails back and forth and check that out. That'd be great.
But no, so there's lots of things like once you have this set up, if you change the camera that you're sending to a
Hmm.
device, the you can actually be controlling that automatically. So whatever camera's there, I don't even have to touch camera selection. I just can do zoom,
Exactly.
pan, uh, and
I
everything I
mean,
want.
I have that right here. So if I pop on over to my PF120 and on my keyboard, I have it's currently subscribed to this. Oh, hold on. I gotta pop on over to a different source.
Yeah, can we put Jake full screen?
Yeah, give me 1 second, guys. So we'll do this. I'll pop on my screen capture, right? So you'll see my central running. And then I'll open up um, my AV transmitter. So I should, let's see, have zoom control, right, on this camera. And then as soon as I switch over to my PF120, oh, wait a minute, one more switch. A lot of switching going on over here. Let's see. have that AV matrix, and then let me open one more studio monitor.
No, all's good.
Just so we can see the cam going. Over here, we have my switch, right?
Yep.
And then we'll go back over to a P200. And now I have zoom control on that other camera. So again, I'll pop on over to my P100. And now I have zoom control and PTZ on the selected source. So it's super easy to be able to quickly change cameras without having to call a new camera through the keyboard.
Yeah, and I think that's where having this in preview is
Yes.
fantastic, because you really don't want to do it live. So, you know, when you have this, the ability to come back and say, what I'd like to have now is, as soon as something's in preview, whatever's in preview, that automatically adjusts to it. And I don't have to think. It's just like I'm looking at preview, tweaking it, and that's great. So a lot of really cool stuff that, you know, is available in here. So we are gonna probably wrap the show for right now.
Well, thanks for having me, John.
Oh,
This was
absolutely.
Really cool.
I'm glad you.
Glad I was able to pop in.
Yeah, I am glad you could go. I didn't think you were going to be available to be part of the show, but this is phenomenal having you here.
Happy to.
So we have our post-show hangout. So you know, sort of more casual. Any types of questions? Would love to have you join us for that. But Jake, again, thank you. I really appreciate
Thanks so
you being
much,
here.
John.
Take
All right,
care.
we'll talk soon. Take care, everyone.
Cool. Bye. So we will wrap this up now. Thank you all for joining for this. Hopefully you found this useful, because I think there really are some interesting things. And right now this is free as part of their beta, I think, through the end of October. So definitely worth, you know, taking a look at. There is also a standard free version, you know, which has less functionality, but still the same core you know, capabilities here from a central management point of view. So hopefully you found this useful. And if you can't hang around for the post show, thank you for joining us here. Really appreciate having you here. And we'll see you next week. And if you're for the post show, see you in a couple of seconds. Thanks, everyone. All right, welcome back, everybody. So this was an interesting show, because I actually saw Central released as a beta, and I was really interested. Hi, Biz Shorty, how are you? Glad you're here now. So I think that when I first saw it, I was thinking, I would love to have ways where you could start to look at sort of the signage space and manage that in a separate framework from the actual switching for production, but still have the two interrelate. And the fact it had API capabilities, that really attracted me, because I saw it was a web-based. And I actually reached out to Jake, whom I know, and he basically said, no, there's sort of going to be a more formal web API for this. And that's what really got me interested. I said, yeah, I definitely would love to do a show, because I think there's a lot of value in having, you know, that sort of automation capability. And again, you know, it's sort of all these things now become more standalone. I can control signage through automation, and I can control a lot of production things through automation, but the same automation is just telling different segments what to do. So hopefully you found that as interesting. So let's see, Hakan has something. He's saying maybe Central would be preferred for IMAG over going through vMix. Yeah, so I think if you're doing anything with IMAG, it really is going to depend on how much latency you can deal with. So NDI, if you're going to be doing IMAG, it would probably be something you'd want to do full NDI, so it has the lowest latency possible. And you know, it may be something that would work, but you're still dealing with, you know, something, you know, in the neighborhood of a frame with full NDI, plus whatever, you know, the circuitry for the IMAG component would need. So you'd have to make sure it would would work for you, because I do know a lot of people for IMAG kind of move into the analog space, or I won't say the analog space, but more the hardware switcher space. So a lot of people use ATEMs for that. But still, for signage, for other things where that absolute sync isn't critical, and like music concerts and other stuff where that becomes really important, it definitely would be great for that, because I think there'll be a lot less latency here than in vMix, because vMix is republishing. So if it subscribes to a source, it's then pushing it out. So if you came here and said, no, what I'm going to actually do is just link the display directly to the source, then it gets rid of all that intermediate latency that you'd have sort of in a vMix pipe, which is not huge, but it's still much more noticeable. So let's see. So Aziz is asking about the cost. He says, since it will not be free. That is correct. So I believe Pro is under $300. It's either $299 or $249. I'm sorry, I don't remember off the top of my head. But so if this is a tool that makes sense to you from a business perspective, this isn't a very large investment. It's something that, certainly if you have the business to justify it, it's not a big ding to the wallet. But still, I mean, $300 is $300, and that's money you have to earn back. So I don't mean to speak lightly, but I understand, that in a professional space, that could be something that is not an impediment to doing it. So definitely, that's why I encourage you to take a look at it and see if it makes sense for you, so you can do this now without having to shell out any money up front. But we just saw it and thought it was definitely a really cool piece of software here. Okay, so if you have any other questions, let's get them in. I know this show has been running for probably over an hour now, so I appreciate everyone hanging around for that. But I think that by and large, the general focus here has been around. So if you look at our sort of our whole series, our shows are about automation and NDI. Where a lot of vMix is in there, but at the core, we're really talking about different ways to automate, streamline workflows for doing things. And so this sort of ticks two of the boxes. And if you're going to do automation through vMix, it ticks all three. So we thought it was a pretty good fit for this. So all right then, I think we have probably covered everything we want to cover for this. So not a very long hangout today, which is fine. But I want to thank everybody for joining it. Oh, we have Gabor Broder, new question. He says, am I correct that this only works with BirdDog endpoint? Because then 300 is a stretch. It is not only that. So let me actually sort of switch back, because I didn't really show this. Let me see if I can switch back here. And I'm going to open up an NDI Studio monitor here. So, all right. So let me see. So what you'll see here is that I do have access to all of the things that are being generated inside of Central here. And so this means that I have all the video source, over here, all of the video sources that we had as the rotating segments. I have my different camera feeds that are a router, and I have different displays that I had set up, and this commentary, which was that mixed feed that I had between the different video from audio sources. So all of these are available coming out of Central as straight NDI. So you can, in doing this, pull these out as segments and use them as well. So you do have that ability in here. So even though the endpoints are a BirdDog only, you do have still access to pure NDI outputs. The other thing to consider, though, is that there is, let me see if I get rid of this and get this back. What Jake held up was something called the BirdDog Play, which is like $150 decoder that is, very streamlined interface. And I think these are all the pieces that BirdDog had in mind sort of coming together here, where if you take the BirdDog Play at 150 and put that on multiple devices and then use this as the software distribution, that's definitely, one way to do it. The other is because you can do things with, you can configure Central to work with multicast. You could actually do this where you just have anybody's converters out there, send these out as multicast feeds. And if the converters can handle multicast, you can be pulling that in and controlling that, sort of based on somewhat on what's going on here. Not quite the same. And because things are now being pushed through here, it's generating these feeds. You don't have exactly the same framework for this, but you can get a lot of the value out of this with either lower end BirdDog with the Play, or using the NDI feeds directly through what you have for standard NDI receiving devices. So hopefully that is a little bit more. But so Aziz is ending with this is a crazy world. Every day there's a better solution. So yeah, it's tough to keep up with everything. I think for all of this, it really comes down to if you're doing this professionally, what will allow me to retain existing clients, attract new clients, provide additional services, add additional value that I can charge for. So I mean, this is really where a lot of this comes from. So even though there's a lot of cool new tech, I think it always foundationally is going to come down to being able to answer something in that space in the affirmative. It's making a difference for my business. If you are doing it because you love it, then it's the logic that goes behind any hobby. It's something that's compelling. So anyway, thank you everyone. Gabor, thank you. Glad that that gives you at least some more perspective on it. So thank you everybody for joining us for today's show. It was a lot of fun doing this. I also want to give a great big shout out to Jake for joining us. That wasn't planned. Jake had worked with me on some of the details to make sure I had the information I needed for the back end of this. And the fact he called in and joined us for the show was fantastic. And I want to thank everybody on the crew here for just handling a giant curveball in the middle of the production and handling it so well. So thanks to everybody here. So take care, everyone. I'll see you all next week.